One woman thought the trip with her boyfriend would be just a fun getaway. Little did she know that fewer than 48 hours later, her terrifying story would be in the headlines.
I'm Kathy with a K.
And I'm Kathy with a C.
And this is Killer Destinations. Today's destination is Moss Point, Mississippi. Located in the way southeast of the state, in Jackson County, the city has a declining population that now sits at just over 12,000 residents. The city's name comes from the moss-covered oak trees that grew at the confluence of the Pascagoula and Escatawpa rivers. Like many southern states, Moss Point has several beautiful buildings listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and Mississippi is the birthplace of the blues, a fact that contributes to the cultural heritage of the region. But in 1996, one young woman on a weekend getaway was singing the blues for an entirely different reason.
In the early morning hours in August of 1996, Jackson County Police received a disturbing 911 call. A woman calls up and said, "There is a hysterical young woman at my front door and she's holding a butcher knife and she's begging for help." So the police were like, "Okay, we'll be there. So what happened is Debbie Sieb was getting her kids ready for school when she heard a loud banging at her front door, and it totally freaked her out. She didn't want to answer the door. So she looks out the window and she sees a young woman who is totally hysterical holding a butcher knife, and she is screaming, please help me. Somebody killed my friend. They had me locked in a metal box." So the woman outside is freaking. Debbie is not about to let a stranger into her house. So she runs, she makes the 911 call, she goes back to the window. The woman says her name is Brooke, but she's begging to come in. And Debbie says, no, I can't let strangers in my house, but come over to the side of my house where the carport is and I'll stand with you. So Debbie leaves her house and she stands outside with this hysterical woman. So Debbie waits there with her. And the police quickly pull up and two officers from Moss Point get out. And Brooke ran to the police and told police a disturbing tale about drugs, rape, and murder.
48 hours earlier, 18-year-old Charlene Leaser, who went by her middle name Brooke, had set off on a short vacation with her new boyfriend, 21-year-old Jeffrey Wolf. The two of them were both from Texas and had met just a few weeks earlier. So on this day, Kathy, the couple's destination was Moss Point, which is on Mississippi's Gulf Coast. So they set out from Conroe, Texas, where Jeffrey was living with his father, and it was a straight shot east about 430 miles. And it took them just a little over 6 hours to get there. Jeffrey had been to this area before, and he told Brooke that part of the reason he wanted to go there was to collect some money that was owed to him from a business deal. He also said he was looking forward to seeing some friends and getting new rims and wheels on his car. The last time he was in town, he had met a guy named Sonny Milano who worked at a tire store, and Sonny had told him he could get him a good deal. Brooke was just excited to get out of town for a few days with her new boyfriend, but on the way there, Jeffrey dropped kind of a bombshell. He told Brooke that he was owed money, over $12,000, and it was money he was owed for drugs that he had actually given to some friends of his to sell for him. And then once they sold it, he was expecting the cash back. And this had happened on his last trip to Mississippi, which was just a few weeks prior. So Jeffrey's plan was to stay in town for the night in Moss Point, collect his debt, and then drive to New Orleans, which was only about an hour and a half southwest, and stay for a short vacation. When the two arrived on the Gulf Coast, they checked into the King's Inn Hotel, and while Brooke took a nap, Jeffrey took his car to a local tire store to have this work done by Sonny. Then Jeffrey, Sonny, and Sonny's girlfriend went back to the hotel and picked Brooke up for dinner.
So, Kath, it was Sonny, the mechanic, and his girlfriend, and Brooke and Jeffrey at dinner. Jeffrey turns to Sonny. He goes, "Hey, by any chance, are you going to be at Gary's house later? I am supposed to go and collect a debt. I don't know if you know this, but he owes me, more than 12 grand. So Sonny's sister was once married to Gary. Gary is 33 years old. Gary and Sonny's sister had since divorced, and Gary did not have a good reputation. So Sonny's girlfriend hears Jeffrey ask him this, and she's like, no. She starts objecting, like, nope, no, don't go to Gary's later. Nothing good happens at Gary's. Don't go to Gary's later. Blah, 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 blah. So the dinner ends and the couples part ways. Jeffrey and Brooke go to Gary's house twice. They just want to collect the debt and be on their way to New Orleans. But he wasn't there both times, so they go back to their hotel and they're hanging out. Well, what happened was Sonny dropped off his girlfriend at her house and was like, see you later, alligator. Then he decided, you know what? I am going to go to Gary's. So he shows up at Gary's.
She can't tell me what to do.
She can't tell me what to do. He goes to Gary's and Gary is home at this point. And Gary is also there with Sonny's brother, Timothy, who went by Timmy. So Sonny and Timmy are former brother-in-laws of Gary. And, they're surprised to see Sonny. So Gary goes, what are you doing here? And he goes, oh, like Jeffrey and his new girlfriend are in town. And I thought they were going to come here to your house. And Gary's like, oh, call him up. Let him know I'm home. Tell him to come over. And he's like, okay, cool. So Sonny calls up Jeffrey and says, hey, I'm at Gary's house. Where are you? Jeffrey's happy to hear from Sonny. They just had dinner together. So he goes, I'll be there in a minute. So he and Brooke get in the car and go on over. When they get there, Timmy and Sonny are gone. So Jeffrey is kind of surprised. He's like, oh, this is okay, whatever.
What happened to him?
Yeah. So Gary is at the house by himself and he's sitting on the porch alone. Now, Gary's house is something, in my opinion, that is straight out of a horror movie.
Doesn't surprise me. Back in the bayou of Mississippi.
But it's supposedly a middle-class neighborhood, but it's a modest home. But he has nearly 2 acres of land. And imagine a home, again, single story, and behind the house, there's a bunch of wooded property. But if you're looking at the house from the road to the left of it, there's a bayou. There's like a little stream that goes by that eventually empties into the Escatawpa River. So it's just like a very scary looking property and it's dark.
But I will say, looking at some of the other houses in the neighborhood, it is a middle class neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe because of where his house was located and being so close to the little river known as a bayou.
Yeah.
Then maybe they'd let it go.
Well, it's funny because the way it's described is having kids' toys and discarded pieces of,
furniture.
Bikes. Yeah. And I guess Gary would, he cut beer cans in half and he'd use the bottom half to hold candles. And so those are what lit his front porch, apparently.
I hope his front porch wasn't made of wood.
Oh, it certainly was. But anyway, so I thought that was interesting. Part of me was like, oh, maybe I'll do the same thing. Anyway.
Oh, please do. If she does, I'll take a picture and I'll post it on our Instagram.
Right.
All over our social media.
So anyway, so they get to Gary's house. Gary's sitting on the front porch and he gets introduced to Brooke and Gary very politely offers them both marijuana. So Brooke
as one does,
very graciously accepts. So she and Gary are smoking on the front porch. Jeffrey declines and they're just chatting. Okay. So Sonny's brother, Timmy, comes back to the property and, so Jeffrey's like, oh, hey, Timmy, how's it going? It turns out that Timmy and Gary together were part of this drug sale deal. And so the 4 of them are hanging out, having a beer, and they go inside the house. So Brooke sits down at a table in the living room and she's rolling another joint. She then hears Jeffrey open up the topic of conversation to the debt that's owed.
Just to clarify, what happened is Jeffrey came into a score of some amount of drugs that we don't know what kind it was. He gave the shipment to Gary to get rid of for him and then was expecting Gary to pay him back.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly. Gary and Timmy were supposed to sell the drugs and give Jeffrey his cut.
Okay, drug dealing 101 is never front the drugs.
I know. Well, no, that's what you got to do. Yes, you do. 100%. Absolutely. You don't want to be the seller.
The TV shows I watch.
Right. Everybody sells their own drugs.
Exactly.
SYOD, sell your own drugs.
It's a class in high school, isn't
exactly.
it? Exactly. It's called Marketing 101.
Right. And actually, it's like everything I read about this case, they owed between 12 and 20,000. And that would have been depending on the price of the market, essentially.
Right.
Anyway, so Jeffrey starts having a conversation, with Timmy and Gary about like, hey guys, you got to make this right, this kind of thing. And starts getting agitated because Timmy basically says, I don't have the drugs. and I don't have the money. And Gary, I believe, was blaming Timmy, like, sorry, he's the one who mismanaged the situation, And so they weren't fighting. They weren't coming to blows or anything like that, but they were having a less than charming conversation.
And it sounded like it was escalating,
Exactly.
Right?
And then all of a sudden, pop! And Brooke screams as she turned to see Timmy holding a .22 caliber rifle, having just shot Jeffrey in the back. So she is horrified. Gary jumps on top of her, forces her face to the ground, and starts screaming. Is Jeffrey a cop? Are you a cop? Did Jeffrey have drugs with him on this trip? Did he bring anything else with him? Who else knows you came here? And he is screaming, and she is freaking out. And she's terrified, and she's answering his questions. But eventually she basically just became totally hysterical and started saying over and over, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. Then she tells him, I just met Jeffrey a few weeks ago, because Gary was on her. Like, he was freaking her out. So he's literally physically laying on her back, just hammering her with these questions. So then he ties her hands behind her back and he binds her feet with some rope. So sort of like a hog tie.
Hog tie.
Exactly. And he puts her in a large metal box. So picture like a really big Foot Locker. And this is a box that she had seen near his bedroom. And he's freaking out and he's telling her, I'm on a time frame that I cannot mess up. And she had no idea what the hell he was talking about and could not believe that her life had taken such a horrific turn in the past 24 hours.
So Brooke has no idea what's happening. She doesn't know why she was tied up. She doesn't know why she was in this box, but she's in a stone cold panic, right? She has now been put into this enclosed metal box and just wants to get the heck out of there. So somehow she's able to untie her hands and her feet, and she just starts kicking at the top of this box with everything she's got, but it would never budge. Then Gary returned. He opened up the top of the box, he removed the ropes that she'd managed to get off, and stripped her nude. He then tied her up again and locked her back in the box. But once again, Brooke managed to untie herself from these ropes, but she still was not able to get the top off the metal box. She was honestly becoming hopeless at her ability to get out of this. So Brooke lay there for quite some time, and she had no idea how long, but I'm sure it seemed like forever, when Gary returned and took Brooke out. At this point, he was nude, and Gary raped her, telling Brooke that her life depended on how well she performed sexually. Afterward, Gary asked Timmy, who was still at the house, if he wanted to take a turn with Brooke. Brooke was then tied up again and locked back in the metal box. Now, after some time, Brooke untied herself for a third time, but Gary returned, and he opened the box and offered Brooke some marijuana. Now, she wanted to placate him, so she accepted. Once Gary was done with Brooke, he gave her a blanket and put her back in the box. Now, hours later, Brooke awoke to the sound of the telephone ringing, and Kath, when no one answered it, she was like, oh, I must be alone. Nobody's here. And of course, she's already feeling hopeless. She had to have been scared to death and really just getting desperate. So Brooke mustered all of her energy and began banging on the top of the box. And Kath, the lid popped off. So as soon as she gets out of the box, she actually sees a bag with some of her clothes and belongings in it. So she just pulls a couple of things on as she's grabbing this bag and trying to get out of the house as fast as she can. She also then sees a butcher knife that's on the kitchen table. So she grabs that in case she runs into Gary as she's running away.
I can't imagine coming out of this box and just being so terrified that they're right around the corner.
Exactly. Is he going to walk through the door or walk out of the bathroom?
Oh, terrible.
But when she grabbed the knife, she also saw another plastic bag in the kitchen that had some of her jewelry in it. So she grabs this too, and along with the bag with some of her stuff and the knife, she booked it out of the house. And she ran out into the street. Now, Kath, as she was running down the street, she looked up and saw Gary's car driving toward his house, and she freaked. She dove into some bushes that were right on the side of the road and had no idea if Gary had seen her or not. But she sees him pull into the driveway, and as soon as she can't see the driver in that car, right, so he wouldn't be able to see her, that's when she got up and she just booked it to the first house, which happened to be Debbie Sieb's house, where she was banging on the door like a lunatic.
so this is the woman who calls 911. So check it out. When the Moss Point police officers get to Debbie's house, they bring Brooke with them back to Gary's house.
I can't believe they did that.
I mean, that's terrifying. They want to see, are there any crimes that were actually committed here? And if so, is anyone still in the house? Are there any other victims? Because she's losing her mind still. She keeps saying,
why did she have to go?
She keeps saying they shot my boyfriend. I don't know. But anyway, they did.
I think they were going to use her as like a shield.
Maybe. Maybe. So police go in the house. Gary is nowhere to be found, and they see blood. They see evidence of violence. They make sure nobody else is in there. Then they back out. They secure it, and they're like, we need a search warrant. So the officers bring Brooke to the police station. And meanwhile, 3 local law enforcement agencies join the search. It's Pascagoula, Moss Point, and Jackson County Sheriffs. Anyway, they also call the Mississippi State Crime Lab to come to Gary's home and start gathering evidence. Now, the crime lab obviously is focused on all the forensic stuff, so they find evidence of sexual assault, specifically a used condom, and of course, evidence of the shooting. Moss Point detectives found a .22 caliber rifle and 8 spent shell casings. And this is crazy. They also found all of Brooke's and Jeffrey's personal items that were left at the King's Inn Hotel.
Oh, that's scary.
Well, yeah. So now they know that Gary and Timmy have gone to the hotel, taken all of Jeffrey and Brooke's stuff to make it look as though, they just left
town.
Yeah. Because this is at a time when you actually checked out of motels.
Right.
Anyway, it was clear to detectives that this was a plan to make it look like Jeffrey and Brooke had just left town. So as, all these law enforcement officers are descending on the property, they notice an aluminum boat tied up. So they go down and they check it out, and fresh blood is seen inside the boat with bloody fingerprints and a piece of flesh.
Ugh.
I know. And near the boat, they found a bunch of those big 5-gallon buckets and a big plastic barrel. They found Clorox bleach, a brush, a knife, and a bush hook. I had to look this up. I didn't know what a bush hook was.
I don't know.
But apparently it's a long blade that's curved, and it's used for cutting brush. Anyway, the brush and the bush hook were covered in blood. So they called the local coroner, Dr. Paul McGarry, to come out and help with the search. Imagine the coroner and detectives, they're floating down the bayou slowly looking for evidence, and they find body parts. They find skin, muscle, chest, abdominal walls. They find a heart, a lung, all this stuff. They find fingers and toes. It's just floating in the reeds and sort of down the river.
Don't bayous have alligators?
Yes, they do. That is the point.
That's why I would not look.
No, exactly. I would be terrified, actually.
I'd be like, you know what? Let's just assume he's in there. We're good.
Right. My niece and nephew went to like a university in Florida, and they would text me pictures of alligators just like randomly walking around. And I'm like, this is terrifying.
Yeah. They're both a little cray-cray. I love them both. They're a little cray-cray. In the
wonderful
best way.
They're
no, they are.
Perfect.
They're cray-cray in the best way. It makes them fun to hang out with.
So once all of these body parts were collected, the coroner immediately recognized that they had been cut precisely, very sharply in block-like sections, and most of the bones had been separated from the flesh. So on the flesh that he found and examined, several pieces had bullet holes, and some of the internal organs had bullet holes as well. Jeffrey's severed head was also found. Over 2 days of searching, they found 126 pounds of human remains in the bayou, all of which belonged to Jeffrey Wolf.
On the same day that they found all the body parts in the bayou, at about 1:30 that afternoon, Timmy Milano was arrested at his apartment. He had no idea that Brooke had escaped. However, Gary Simmons could not be found. So, of course, law enforcement went to work trying to locate Gary and interview any of his known associates. So, Kath, getting back to how Jeffrey Wolf had been cut up, Turned out Gary worked as a butcher at a local meat market. And one of his coworkers, this guy named Charles, said that Gary had sharpened all of his knives and took them home from work on the weekend. Charles told police that this was really unusual because everyone normally left their knives at work. He said that he only recalled seeing people take their knives if they were going on a long vacation, quitting, or had been fired. This made it clear to police that Jeffrey Wolf's murder was premeditated. And Kathy, one of Gary's neighbors also told police that just hours before Brooke's escape, Gary had asked to borrow his boat. But then something unexpected happened. The day after Brooke escaped, Jackson County Sheriff's Office received a call from someone identifying himself as Dennis Guess, and he said he was a friend of Gary Simmons and said Gary wanted to turn himself in, but only to Deputy Randy Neal. Now, Kath, it turned out that Deputy Neal was not really a friend of Gary's, but it was someone with whom Gary was acquainted, and so he trusted the deputy. So the day after Brooke's escape, Deputy Neal and Moss Point Detective Lee Merrill, who was in charge of the investigation, waited to see if Gary would show up. And he did, and was immediately arrested. What police discovered, Kath, was that Gary dismembered Jeffrey in the bathtub of his home. Now, after gutting him and severing his head and limbs, with Timmy Milano's help, Gary began distributing Jeffrey's remains into the bayou that ran behind Gary's property using the neighbor's boat. Gary and Timmy were really hoping that alligators would eat the remains or the current would sweep them on out to the Gulf. Gary said he left his house after disposing of Jeffrey's remains and drove to Mobile, Alabama, where he made a videotape for his ex-wife, Timmy's sister, and children. Gary spoke to his family in this video about what he had done, but never specifically admitted committing any crimes. He then mailed the video to his wife and drove back to the Gulf Coast. When he got home, he noticed that Brooke had escaped, and that was when he immediately drove to see his friend Dennis Guess, the guy who helped turn him in.
So, Kath, as you said, Gary mailed this video to his ex-wife. It turns out he was trying to get back together with her. And she had 4 kids at this point. I think 2 of them were his. I'm honestly not sure because she had a first marriage. But after all of this transpired, it turns out that she was willing to reveal what Gary was like as a husband, and he was awful. And he kept these journals about wanting to have a sex slave, essentially. So Gary's ex divorces him. Now, as you said, she is Timmy's sister. She found out that Timmy was still hanging out with Gary, and she was upset about it. So the phone call that woke up Brooke when she was in the box was actually Gary's ex-wife calling him, looking for her brother, Timmy.
Wow, so she saved Brooke.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
It is.
Yeah. So anyway, thought it was an interesting side note.
So talking about that, Kathy, court records actually showed that Gary told Dennis, the man who helped turn him in, that he had just whacked a drug dealer, deboned him, and cut him up in little pieces and put him in the bayou. But then Gary told Dennis that back at his house, he had a girl in a box and he planned to train her and keep her around as a sex toy. But she had escaped. Their conversation then turned to what realistic options Gary had, which were going on the run, killing himself, or turning himself in. So, fewer than 48 hours after Brooke's dramatic escape, Gary was in custody.
Gary and Timmy were both charged with capital murder in the commission of a robbery and kidnapping and raping Brooke. I just want to touch on capital murder in the commission of a robbery. So Timmy, we know, is the one who shot Jeffrey. However, because they were committing a robbery, they had taken money from Brooke. They took $200 from her wallet. They took $1,000 from Jeffrey, and they had taken jewelry and belongings and all this stuff, and they had done so by force against their will. And so because it was during the commission of a robbery, it's the capital offense, and even though Gary wasn't a trigger puller, he could be held responsible for it. Gary Simmons' trial began on August 25th, 1997, and this is just over a year after Jeffrey's murder. It turned out that Brooke had lied about Timmy raping her. When Brooke first spoke to police, she told them that both men had raped her because Gary offered to allow Timmy to rape Brooke. But it turns out Timmy didn't do it. So Brooke lied about Timmy raping her, and she admitted she lied at Gary's trial. She admitted on the stand that she lied because she wanted both men punished. So what happens is the prosecutor's really mad.
Of course.
Because he finds out really just before her testimony at trial that she's changing her story now. He thought he had
a slam dunk.
Well, he thought Timmy was a rapist as well, even though this was Gary's trial. But now he knows he has to, I'm not going to call it rehabilitate her because you can't really, but you have to bring it out that
do some damage control.
Yeah, but he's upset. And so he's cross-examining her almost. And isn't it true that when you first did da-da-da-da, you told him you were raped and this and that and yada, yada,
so he's kind of treating her as a hostile witness.
Yes. Yeah, and she was a hostile witness. She's 19 years old at this point, and she wants nothing to do with this.
She wants to forget it all.
But she knows she has to be there. Then the defense attorney came and he is trying to tear her apart. He's trying to tear her apart about the rape. And, you admitted to smoking marijuana with this guy, Gary, and then you admitted to smoking it later and, blah, 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 blah. So finally, at some point, she explodes. I read a newspaper article and she basically says, I am 19 years old. I'm supposed to be in college, not in a trial for capital murder. I'm supposed to be in school, not down here with this. You go back and remember all this. It's only a year ago. I don't want to remember this because I'm trying to forget. And you are trying to make me look stupid by trying to make me remember the worst thing that has ever happened to me. So when I read this in the newspaper, I thought to myself, okay, that's authenticity.
Oh, yeah.
This girl was trapped in this box for God knows how long. And here she is being attacked by both attorneys.
Well, and she met a cute guy. They'd been dating for a couple weeks. She's all excited.
Yeah, they're in the infatuation stage.
They go on a trip and bam,
all hell breaks loose.
Her life changes forever.
Totally.
Irrevocably.
Yes. So 4 days after trial started, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all 3 counts in the indictment: the capital murder, the kidnapping, and the rape against Gary Simmons. So for the kidnapping and the rape, the judge sentenced him to separate life sentences, and a separate sentencing hearing was held on the capital murder conviction, and the jury unanimously wanted this man put to death. Timmy Milano went to trial a year later in 1998, and he took the stand and said that Gary Simmons was the one who pulled the trigger, but the jury didn't buy it. But Timmy was 19, 20. He was young. Gary was 33. And the jury saw how, what's the word I'm looking for? Impressionable, fearful, that kind of thing that Timmy was of Gary. So they were a little lenient, and his jury convicted him on capital murder and kidnapping, but they recommended LWOP, and the judge agreed.
That actually shocks me. And I get that there are always circumstances that you need to consider, but the fact that he was the trigger puller and the non-trigger puller got death, honestly, it just surprises me.
Yeah. So after Timmy's trial, Jeffrey Wolf's father said, "This is not about hate. I lost something dear to me, and I think he should pay with his life. I don't believe my son had anything to do with drugs. He was a hell of a boy. We had a good relationship. He was a beautiful boy." On June 20th, 2012, Gary Simmons was executed by lethal injection at the Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchman. Timmy Milano is currently sitting in the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility in Pearl.
Thank you for listening.
And we look forward to hearing any story suggestions.
And we hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble. Why did you say that, Kathy?
My favorite is the stuffing.
I know.
It's the best.
My favorite is going to your house for dessert.
I know. And I'll leave the light on for you.